Welcome to the BTS Presents show.
I'm Brian Schulman, I'm the producer. We're currently doing segments on Santa Cruz County and Silicon Valley real estate behind the scenes. Thanks for watching.
Hi, I'm Candace Bradfield, broker and owner of Bradfield & Associates, and past president of our Santa Cruz County Association of Realtors. I want to thank you for joining BTS Presents.
Hi, I'm Dada Kalsa. Welcome back to the show. We appreciate you joining us. We have an interesting format we're going to try with this show. We always pride ourselves in bringing divergent views together, and I'm often surprised at these breakout sessions that happen in between our segments. I have Dan Coughlin, who's a co-founder of Santa Cruz Together. Currently, it's a grassroots campaign to stop the rent control measure from passing. And next to him is Sarah Taylor, one of the more successful realtors in town, whose focus is, this would surprise you because Sarah, being a housing professional, her focus is helping people find and buy properties. And Dan, not being really in any way affiliated with the housing industry, has become a self-taught expert on this matter in pretty short order in response to concerns that were raised when he heard about this measure. So Dan, how did you get involved in this?
So in 2017, the Movement for Housing Justice, which is the group that's promoting this ballot initiative, we're starting to get serious, and it was in the paper, and I knew that there was that they were going to promote this rent control initiative, and I studied economics in business school, and I knew that artificial price controls and undue regulation is tough. It makes it tougher to do business, and in this case, the business of providing housing. And but it was largely quiet, and the city was having community outreach groups with the Blueprint Subcommittee, and but it wasn't until February when the city took the emergency vote that we'd spoken about earlier in anticipation of landlords increasing rent ahead of the ballot initiative or starting to evict tenants. The city took action, this emergency action, to cap rents increases and some level of just cause. And I was there, and as were a number of now executive members of the Santa Cruz Together now. And it was just quickly done, and so there was a instant reaction by those in the city that the city had done something this kind of quick, and so in the end it was beneficial because we got a kind of a head start on this. It really kind of set the city aflame, and I was over on the east side. I was starting to build up email distribution lists of people that were concerned about it. Lynn Renshaw was doing the same thing on the west side, and there's some other members of our campaign that were starting just to build awareness. Within 3 weeks, we were working arm in arm. A week after that, it was a formal campaign, and in parallel, we were doing case studies on where rent control has been enacted in other municipalities, mostly in California. And I'll say this: that the rental market is tough here. It really is tough. We acknowledge that it's hard. But if you're trying to create affordable housing, this is the exact opposite way of doing it. It will do the exact opposite of what they're trying to accomplish. And so we looked at these case studies in these different municipalities, and almost universally, housing the number of units go down and prices go up. And so the thing that scared me the most, I think, was just the town. Santa Cruz it's just got its own unique personality, and a large part of that is the relationships between landlords and tenants. I have yet really to meet anybody that's had a difficult relationship there. It's mostly very cordial and very friendly and professional and personal. And I think if you establish this rent control board that will be an adjudicator of disputes, and I think we'll start just tearing away at the fabric of our town. That's the thing that bothers me the most. I'm not committed to living here. I'm going to retire here. I'm going to be an old guy here, and I just don't want to lose that personality of this town.
So Sarah, speaking as a local housing professional, a lot of this stuff, are you hearing it for the first time, or you've been hearing obviously certain things through the community. Do you have any questions specifically for Dan, who's obviously very involved in this campaign?
I don't have any questions specifically. I'd like to just to share with you my thoughts is that I have been listening and hearing through the community because I'm a local realtor and work with clients. A lot of first-time home buyers too that have been renting for many, many years. And what the conversation I have with my clients is that if you're planning to stay in the community and you're already paying a lot of rent, a 2-bedroom right now in Santa Cruz is renting for about $3,500, which is very, very high. Then why not get you in the market and get you into a home or a condo or a mobile, something, get your foot in the door instead of continuing to pay rent and paying somebody else's mortgage is kind of how I look at it. And I've been successful in helping a lot of first-time home buyers do that. So having said that, I think that the discussion is incredibly important that we're having it because the city council made that decision, and there are a lot of landlords out there, homeowners who are very concerned, and understandably so. I'm also a homeowner. At one point, my husband and I owned 4 properties locally, and we had rented, and we had the option at the time, obviously, to pick and choose who we rented to, and we had a lease, and we collected rents, and the tenants moved out. That was 10 years ago, and so it's a different situation now. And I do see that a lot of concerned local homeowners are putting their homes on the market because they are concerned about what's going to happen. So I really believe in democracy and that the voters should decide this. We live here, we pay taxes here, should be our decision if rent control comes or goes, not just the decision of the city council.
Right, agreed.
So that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, and let me be clear, the city council, they put in these ordinances and they're temporary. So they will expire in November regardless of the outcome of the ballot initiative. So and I think their heart, again, was in the right place. I think they were really trying to stem the tide of what might be bad behavior by landlords.
And by some landlords.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, there are bad landlords and there are bad tenants, but I think the threat of this ballot initiative would incentivize housing providers to, if they're going to be capped. A lot of most of our members, they come to us and they give us testimony about how they've kept rents low. As a favor, they're trying to make it more affordable. They love their tenants, and one of the aspects of this ballot initiative is that will be your base rent forever, and so there'll be just a CPI increase to that. And I ran some numbers before this panel. If let's say you're renting if you're a landlord, you're renting something for $1,500 a month, and you have to put a new roof on that piece of property. That's $15,000. It's going to take you 20 years to pay off that roof. If you just run it out with I think a 2.5% increase per year. And that's scary. I mean, the homeowner is taking a risk. They're putting out capital. The ballot measure talks about the landlord being able to make a fair and equitable return, but the base rent that had been set was low, artificially low. That's not accounted for. Now, the ballot measure allows you to appeal this to the Rent Control Board and try to make a case for being able to try to catch up, but that's a difficult process. We have a member in our group who owns apartments in Mountain View, and Mountain View had just got rent control passed in November 2017. She's spent and she kept her rent super low, and she has spent now $30,000, and she's produced 5,000 pages of documentation as evidence to the Rent Control Board to try to be able to bump her base rent. And so that's kind of what it's again further disincentive for just a mom and pop landlord. They don't want to deal with that. They'll just sell.
Wow.
And they'll sell single family homes, and they'll sell it to somebody over the hill. Just like you said, 90% of your clients are coming from over the hill. There's a ready market. And so we're seeing it now. The houses are being sold just with the threat of this.
Well, we so happen next to you to have 2 gentlemen who have actually been in court, faced off against each other, ironically. Ed Fry, who is a local citizen and lawyer who is specialized in landlord-tenant law, and also has social political views that are basically in support of redistribution of wealth, or a more just distribution of wealth. And then next to him, Darius Mosenine, who's one of the largest private housing providers in the area, and yet the vibe between the two of you is surprisingly cordial and respectful. I think that's probably partly because of Darius's social political leanings that are much more liberal than you might expect of somebody with the amount of property that he has. So can you cue us in a little bit on where the discussion was going? It was the liveliest, I think, of the three panelist pairs here.
Well, we were covering a lot of things from one thing that I was actually talking to Ed about was, by the way, I've always referred to him, just so you know, I always referred to you when I'm talking about you, and I have to other folks as the other ponytail lawyer. Tony Serra being the one. So you're in good company. Anyway.
Don't forget Ray Grunet.
Oh, okay. I don't know him. But
No, he's passed.
okay. Anyway.
He's not, yes, he's still alive.
He's coming back.
He's coming back. That was one of only 2 ponytailed realtors in town. I once lost my ponytail, but I don't think it gets any cred. But okay, that's a good start.
One thing that's sorely lacking in this community, and it's surprising given the progressive nature of the people here. It is the smallest county in Santa Cruz. People know each other, and they're very active. There's no mediation organization focused squarely on landlord-tenant issues. And what I mean is something where the problem with landlord-tenant relations today here in Santa Cruz is there's only one forum really to resolve differences, and it's 700 Ocean Street, the courthouse. Landlords hate going there. Landlords hate evictions. They're costly, time-consuming. They always typically lead to bad feelings on both sides. And it's the nature of landlord-tenant disputes, majority of them being non-payment of rent, could be resolved through an ombudsman an ombudsman group, or entity. And there are ones that there's an organization called Echo Housing that's in 21 jurisdictions in the Bay Area. They're lean and mean. I'm familiar with San Leandro. I have property there too. Echo Housing provides mediation services and fair housing services for tenants in San Leandro, and it costs them a total of $25,000 a year. It costs the San Leandro $25,000 a year.
And what's the cost of filing a complaint in that system?
Zero. I mean, the tenants can file a complaint, and then their caseworker reviews it. They contact me. We discuss it. We come up, and majority of the times we resolve it without any litigation.
So Ed, speaking as a lawyer, how does this sound to you? But a lawyer with a strong social conscience, obviously.
Well, it sounds very commonsensical, really. I mean, we have the very rigid legal system with a lot of ancient laws and even modern day laws that cause a lot of problems and don't make a lot of sense. Judges have to follow the law, whatever it is, and there's all kinds of formalities you got to go through, and fees you got to pay, and delays, in the court system. And so I'm all in favor of a more mediation-oriented system, which is, because each case is unique. Each landlord-tenant dispute, it has its own unique features, and so it ought to be a process of discussion and negotiation about the particular facts of that particular tenancy, and you'd get a more just result, I think, if people could listen to each side. Whereas a judge, he's got maybe 8 or 9 eviction cases on her or his calendar in the morning. They got to take one after another, rapid fire. And it's all hit or miss.
Okay. Well, let's switch gears. Is there anything the two of you don't particularly agree on? I'll throw out the basically the statement that private property ownership is theft by nature in a capitalist society. So speaking as a private property owner of a fair amount of housing, that would insinuate that you've stolen what you have. I think there's probably a broader sense of just the system not being fair. So do you want to speak to that a little bit, and how do you, because obviously the two of you get along and have similar, at least social views, if not economic views. So how do you reconcile that?
Well, I don't know that we can reconcile it right away. I mean, it's a very long developing problem through history of how real property is controlled and who gets to own it, who gets to control it. I mean, it's very long history, and I think if we could just have a public dialogue about the present system, where all parties, can come together and hash it out.
Okay, well, how about a private dialogue? You've got a property owner here. How would you propose, for example, that Darius reallocate or contribute in a way that wouldn't be unfair to him and that would help society?
Well, you'd have to have a system-wide development where everybody is involved and everybody would have an equal say in what's going on when you're developing a new system. But in operating a new and equitable system of land distribution, I think everyone should have. It's like the proposal to have a guaranteed income for everyone. That everyone is entitled to dignity, a sense of dignity.
Maybe some health care?
Everyone is entitled to health care. Everyone is entitled to decent housing, decent education, and so on. And so the housing part, you'd have to make sure that the bottom line would be that everyone has the right to occupy decent housing.
And so, Darius, you've put forth a couple of ideas. Do you want to? We have about a minute left of your guys' discussion.
Okay. I think Ed, reading between the lines, he believes that housing is a basic human right, like health care, like clean water, and so forth and so forth and so on. I agree with that. I mean, I've seen lives transformed when I've rented to like a VASH, that's a veteran's voucher. Take them off the street. They have stable. Once you have stable housing, you have stable health. Your health stabilizes. Your mental health stabilizes. Your physical health stabilizes. You're able to get a job. You're able to start, contributing to the economic engine of the community you're in. But the cost of should not be put on moms and pops and individual land property owners. That is a uniquely government burden, I believe. And I think it's a failure of government, both federal and state, given the order of magnitude that's required to solve it. I think it's a failure on their part, and there needs to be more money, subsidies for public housing or for novel, out-of-the-box means of creating more housing, relaxing requirements for carports in Santa. For instance, locally, we've got so much covered parking was required for building new units. I think they have relaxed that. There's fire sprinkler requirements. These are actually rather onerous and add $15,000-$20,000 to the cost of housing. Relaxing some zoning restrictions, or looking at parking is a big driver of density, for instance. And maybe, for instance, I would gladly sign with a land use agreement that says I can only rent to folks without cars, and therefore I can get more density. And there are a lot of people without cars. And if you look at millennial trends, they're either waiting longer or not getting driver's license. My young niece,
you might even take out kitchens. Very few people of some generations,
or a very minimal kitchen.
So, thank you. I wish we had more time for each pair. So, then we have Jim Weller and Lynn Renshaw, and Jim is a local minister and title expert, and Lynn is a co-founder of Santa Cruz Together and an outspoken opponent of rent control. What do you see as the shortfalls in what they're proposing with this rent control ordinance?
there's a lot of things about the initiative that are an overreach. So, for example, it regulates single-family homes, and there's instances where if you had to, you know, my parents are aging, so if I wanted to lease my house and go take care of my parents for a couple years, I'd come back, I would owe up to $18,000, $20,000 in relocation fees to live in my own house. So I want it to be clear to people that we're not just discussing things that are only about renters. It affects ordinary homeowners, ordinary neighborhoods. But one of the things that we were talking about specifically, so affordable housing is, I've looked at these tables, there's a table where there's your income and then the allowable rent, and it's California regulated, it is means tested. Rent control itself isn't means tested, and what, you know, in all the studies that have been done, what it does is it dislocates the lowest income people because you create more competition. So the people who succeed in securing housing are, again, the higher income people. So it's not correlated to helping the people it intends to help. So in that way, it's a very blunt policy. So affordable housing is targeted to exactly who it's intending to help. And this one has all these side effects where it's displacing the very people it intends to help, the low-income people. There's special protections for families, this part about moving unlimited people up to 1 per 50 square feet. So then you have a situation where it's going to be hard for families to find a place to live. The more competition you have, the easier it is to just select a tenant. So, you know, there's many flaws in it because it's 32 pages long. And what I'm talking about is not abstract rent control, I'm talking about this specific policy. And then the other thing we were talking about is that you can't really say, let's put in the most extreme rent control law in California, and then let's talk about building inclusionary housing and expanding the ADU strategy and creating micro units and all these other things, because the laws are so onerous that people won't make those investments. So you can't just say, we're going to do all these things at the same time. Rent control will prevent other strategies from working.
And so, Jim, you're in the process of potentially building 30 units of housing, which I think everybody agrees will be a positive thing.
Right.
And I think in our discussion before this segment, you had mentioned that it would be exempt from rent control because of Costa-Hawkins, but let's say hypothetically if Costa-Hawkins was repealed as it's been proposed, how would that impact your development and your desire to basically see that housing go towards rental versus perhaps selling it to or developing it as specifically low-income housing?
Well, our commitment is to develop affordable rental units. By affordable, we mean available to people of modest means. And it's also our commitment to set aside a quarter of the units that we build as controlled low-income rental properties for lower and very low-income people.
Under Measure J, or?
I'm not sure
Okay.
whether it's under J, but it's going to be a contractual arrangement with the and part of the permit process. So we're going to go beyond the 15% inclusionary requirement to 25%. I think personally that because of our situation and our design and our business arrangement with our partners, we will be able to build these units with conventional financing and offer them at relatively low rents in perpetuity.
It's a great vision.
That's our plan.
Yeah.
If Costa-Hawkins is repealed and rent control is imposed in a way that affects our rental decisions, then I feel that it will probably not hamper us in what we intend to do, because we're not intending to get the highest rent possible anyway. We do have a concern though, and that is the construction lending environment locally may be affected by perceptions of the future effects of rent control. So what I'm saying is that, for instance, my developer partner, who's a housing developer locally, is concerned that local bank construction lenders may feel that under rent control, it will be problematic for a project to produce enough revenue to serve the debt reliably in the long term. So we'll have to cross that bridge when we come to it.
But that might result in lower number of units, perhaps, or?
It's hard to say what it might result in.
But I think that's the big concern, is the unintended consequences, I think, of a lot of these things. What was perhaps the most surprising thing that Lynn informed you about with the new measure?
Well,
Yes.
just to give full disclosure, I'm in favor of the rent control ballot proposition. I'm not part of the central committee that organized it, although I have collected signatures for it. I think it's probably going to pass because there's such a massive groundswell in favor of it. I'm really interested, though, at this stage in hearing what the concerns are of those in the community who oppose it.
And do you see, I mean, let's take San Francisco or Berkeley, for example, as cities that had rent control passed in the 80s, and obviously suffer the same problems of homelessness and high rents that we do. I think San Francisco, it's like $6,000 for a 2-bedroom unit, right? So that doesn't concern you, that we might be looking at a repeat of that?
It's in the hands of the voters, and I don't intend to engage in debate about it. But no, it doesn't concern me. I think that all other municipal situations in other historical periods are different in complex ways, and that it's kind of a facile approach to just say as a blanket statement that no rent control regime anywhere in California has ever worked, period. And all economists say it doesn't work. Well, that doesn't move me a lot.
Lynn, you want to make a final statement? We've got about 30 seconds.
Well, okay, so the main thing to remember is that no initial rents are decreased, and the high rents also don't go down. So rents are still high. The example today, if you look on Craigslist and see what you're going to find under rent control, we have rent control, check the prices, they're pretty much the same. So it sounds good, but in practice, it's not going to make a material difference for the prices, particularly for houses, because houses are not price rent regulated. So instead of thinking we're speculating about this, we have it now. Take a look.
As usual, time runs short.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching the BTS Presents show.
Broker and owner of Main Street Realtors. Thanks for joining us.